Dr. Lenzy R. Wallace, Jr., born in 1927, Hartford, Connecticut. Well, we lived on a street that was basically very interracial. We had Italian families, Jewish families, black families, one Russian family, in fact. And the thing about it, people came together, you know, and they looked out for each other, and they were, you know, we'd have snowball fights with one side of the street fighting against the other, and nobody thought to put a stone inside of a snowball fight or something like that. And people were generally, you know, some of the ladies were in and out of each other's homes for whatever reasons. Yeah, we were the first in the neighborhood to have a telephone, and people first began to use that. And then they got what they call party lines, which is a cheap means of getting a phone. So people around us started getting phones, and the phone had a distinctive ring to it. Deep, deep might be our phone, deep, deep, deep might be somebody else's phone, or somebody else listening in on your conversation, that type of thing. Looking at that neighborhood, it was the way the way you'd like to see a neighborhood, except that for the sake of most people, most of them were poor. We were poor, they were poor, so we had that in common. In high school, I was in the choir. I never got into the band because I never could afford an instrument. But I was in the choir, and I also was accepted into the top choir, which was an all-city choir, that the top singers were invited to come and sing. And I don't remember the name of the choir, but it was something that was above and beyond the normal high school choirs that you see. And they did work that some of the pros do. We did work that some of the pros do. The other thing I remember, I was shy. I remember if I went to a school dance, people, and if I asked a girl to dance and she said no, that was it. I didn't bother to ask anybody else. I was very shy. I worked in G. Foxwell and Company at that time, which was one of the major downtown stores, and what they call a soda jerk. I do remember that if you were black, you couldn't eat there, because even though in the South you knew places you couldn't go, that was one place that would not serve. You could come in and sit and sit and sit and sit. Nobody would come to serve you. And I guess the main thing I remember about that is that there was a circus fire that occurred while I worked there. We were sending food, we were packaging up food, and particularly for people who were the firefighters, the police department, and any other people who were trying to help. Because the fire it burned, it killed a lot of people. And for a long time, there was one young girl, about 3 to 5 years old, who was never identified for years. And I remember there was one particular police officer who was trying his best to find out who she was and how come, and she wasn't burned that badly. Her facial features were okay. Her body was pretty badly burned, I guess. At that time, the war was still going on in Germany, and people were being drafted. When you turned 18, you had a draft, you had to report to draft. And so I remember when we'd go to the movies and we'd see these movies, sound, part of it would be what's going on in the world type thing, you know. Another fellow and I, Frank Davis, and I joined the Navy. We got permission from our dads to go and volunteer for the thing. So at 17 years old, we each volunteered for the Navy.
The United States Navy, the floating forts of America's first line of defense. From the Atlantic to the Pacific, wherever extends our interest or influence, from Pearl Harbor to Panama, from Nome to Norfolk, from Guam to Guantanamo, wherever our flag waves over water, there our fighting fleet is prepared to go.
Yeah, after boot training, I spent about 9 months in the South Pacific. We were taken down. I was an electrician's mate, and probably one of the first black electrician's mate, because in the Navy at that particular time, the Navy was segregated. In that particular time, if you were black, you could either be a steward, which means you waited on the officers, cleaned their cabinets, ironed their shoes, and all that kind of stuff, or a cooks and bakers. Towards the end of my boot training, Truman desegregated the Navy and the Army, both of which had been were the last to be desegregated.
There is no justifiable reason for discrimination because of ancestry, or religion, or race, or color.
I finished boot training, and then because I passed a test with a very high score on to become electronics or electrician, they put me in electrician school. And so then I was sent over to Manus Island in the South Pacific to help produce a telephone system throughout the island. So we did that while we were there. But then when I got back, we had to, I was waiting to go home after it's been, because the war ended while I was there. And so we were expecting to, I was expecting to go home. So I hear my name being called. I go down, look at the board, and it said, for further duty aboard the U.S. General H. Butler going to Shanghai, China. We had some 22,000 Marines in China at that time, and we had to go over and pick up our sailors. All the way over, before we picked up the troops from San Diego to China, the sea was as smooth as a piece of glass. Coming back, we ran into that typhoon, and the ship was being tossed around like it was a stick in the water. And you had as the ship moved up, the front of the wave, and then the front part of the ship went over like that, and the fantail, the back part of the ship came out of the water with the screws, and the whole ship would just shake. And of course, the Marines, they were down in their bunks, upchucking all over the place, because they hadn't been in something like that in a long time. Most vivid Navy was learning how to fire a 20 millimeter and a 40 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. 20 millimeters shoot a shell about that big around. 40 millimeters shoot a shell about that long and about that big around. Their purpose is to knock down a plane. And so we had to learn how to do that. And each one of the anti-aircraft weapons have two people at least. One person is loaded and the other person is doing the firing. And in this particular case, I was doing the firing. And what happened was there is a thing very much like a cog or a cogwheel type thing, and you kind of move the gun around, and you had complete vision on the sky. You just moved around, and you step on this cog, and you move to the next cog, and the gun would spin around with you. And so they said, the first thing was, after we had learned how to do all the stuff, the person said on the other side said, 40 millimeters, aim your target. So they aim at target. 20 millimeters, aim. And I got this thing on my side, I'm going to blow it out of the sky. So I thought, now I'm 17, a little over 17 at the time. And I pulled the trigger on this thing, and the thing starts spinning me around. And I still have the trigger. I'm shooting bullets into the sky all over the place, and this thing spun me around, and the way it held you in with two shoulder straps across both shoulders, it kicked me off of the shoulder strap, and I wound up in a heap in the floor. And I'm sure, in fact, the guy who was training us, then they came over and reamed me out, of course. But I'm sure he went home and laughed his head off. And when I left the States in the Navy and wound up in Hawaii, I'd been there about a week, and I heard this dance band playing, and I remember I played guitar. And I followed this to a hotel, and there was a friend of mine, Gene, who was a fantastic piano player. And he was sitting up there, and this was the Navy now, and these are all Navy guys, and this was a top, and I come to find out later, these are some of the top New York players in this Navy band. And so Gene saw me, we came, and when they took a break, and he said, a guitar player is leaving. Have you been practicing? Yeah, I've been practicing. He said, can you cite me? I said, yeah. And so, and put you to deck, I had my guitar with me during the whole time I was in the Navy. And so he said, "Why don't you sit in?" So I'll talk to the guitar player and see if he'll let you borrow his what's name. So he did. I sat in and I played 2 or 3 songs, and I started doing solos. And so all of a sudden I could see the approval glances on either side of me from the other guys in the orchestra. And so the leader of the orchestra came over and said, "We want you in the orchestra." Now, at this particular point in time, I had just finished electrician's mate school, and I was supposed to be going to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii to the Philippine Islands, and the Philippine Islands to Manus Island to help put in a telephone system that I spoke about earlier. And so now I'm excited about the possibilities of playing in this band. This band played for some of the top officials when they came to town, you know, the top American admirals and so forth and so on. They played for the governor's ball and all that kind of stuff. And they were stationed, serving their duty by playing. And now I'm excited about the fact that I'm going to be playing behind Ella Fitzgerald. I'm going to go back out of the Navy. I'm going to go to New York, and I'm going to be playing at all these things. And I'm excited. So I don't know exactly what the time was between that captain saying, "We're going to get you into our band. We need players like you in the band," and the fact that I hear my name being called and down to a board to check out. So I go down to the board, and the wall says for me to pack my gear and board the U.S. General H. Butler going to Shanghai, China to pick up those Marines I spoke about earlier. And I am a sick puppy by this time because I'm going to be I'm going to be great. Oh no, all that kind of stuff. But that's not the way I was supposed to go, because most of those guys went back, and in the 50s in New York, basically, or juggalugging, or fast women, all that kind of stuff. Could I have been able to pull away from that? Especially when everybody's saying if you smoke, if you intake, you play faster and you play better. They found Gene in an alleyway dead. A lot of the people that you probably read about were on stuff. Could I have stayed away from that? I don't know. But God kept me away from that. When I came out of the Navy, and I had the GI Bill, so the GI Bill allowed me to go to college at first. But when I ran out of GI Bill, and by that time I'd gotten married to my first wife, and we started raising a family, and I didn't think that I'd ever be able to get back to school. But then I had a job where I was a file clerk for the Veterans Administration, and we'd be filing for. And I came home one night and I told my wife at that time, I said, that was Janet, I says, I can't do this, otherwise I'm going to be crazy. I got to go back to school. So we worked it out, and I started back to school, and I completed the school and kept on going once I got started. Well, it goes back to when I was in junior high school. And in junior high school, I took a course that was supposed to determine whether or not you could do a foreign language, and I flunked the course. And the teacher, whose name I won't mention, said, "You people can't do foreign language." Emphasis on you people can't do foreign language. It just so happened that another teacher by the name of Mrs. Ryan, I'll name her Mrs. Ryan, because what she did for me actually carried throughout my entire life. She pulled me into her classroom, she said, and she gave me this poem. She said, "I want you to learn this poem." And she says, anytime you come up against something, I want you to remember that poem and repeat it to yourselves. So the poem goes, "Somebody said it couldn't be done, but he with a chuckle replied that maybe it couldn't, but he would be one who wouldn't say so till he tried." So he buckled right in with a trace of a grin on his face. If he were it, he hit it. He started to sing as he tackled that thing that couldn't be done, and he did it. There are 2 to 3 more stanzas to that, but you get the idea. And each stanza just reinforces the fact that if somebody says no, I'm going to go around you, over you, under you, whatever, or through you to get the job done, you know. And so that really, anytime I came up against something in the class, I would think somebody said it couldn't be done, maybe, and that kind of thing. And the poem, and not only did it work for me, but when I began teaching, first of all, I had actually thought to myself, I would never tell a child that he or she couldn't do something. I might have thoughts in my mind, but I would not say to them, I'd say, give it a shot, you know. So, and working with students in school, that's what I did. And we put out some of the best bands and choirs in Connecticut at that particular point in time. And the poem became a thing that I used with the kids. When I would give them music that was way above where they thought they could play it. Junior high school music, my kids were playing high school music, high school rated music. And whenever they would say, this is too hard, we can't do it. I'd say, somebody said it couldn't be done, but by the time they heard that about the swing, okay, we'll do it. So when I got to corporate world, same thing. I was training managers and all, working with their teams and that kind of thing. And they say, oh, this is tough. Somebody said it couldn't be done, but likewise with them, by the 15th time they heard that, okay, we'll get it done. Yeah. I started teaching school in Rockville, Connecticut. And I taught junior high school band and choir, and did that for 10 years, I believe it was. This young lady came to me one day and she broke down and started crying. And she was in my choir. And so I asked her, what's wrong? She told me she had just been diagnosed with cancer, and her father actually had fallen down and could really, I guess her dad was having a tough time accepting it, and as I can understand what that was. And so we became close. I would help her whenever she would feel bad. We'd just sit down and talk about it. And I said, by that time, I had also previously had cancer in my bladder, so I could rationalize and talk with her about my experience, and she could relate to that. And we became very good friends. You know, I mean, she as she grew up and started having her own family, we still kept in touch. In fact, I just heard from her a couple of days ago. She was somebody who really needed support, really needed help, and I was very glad that I was there to be able to help her. Basic thing I told her, if I can overcome cancer, you can too. And then I would read my poem. Somebody said it couldn't be done, but she with a chuckle replied, or maybe it could, but she would be one who wouldn't say so until she tried. After I got my PhD, and I left Rockville, where I was working, I was 61 when I started working in corporate. And I was hired by an individual who really valued what I could bring and taught me a lot in the process as well. And so I worked basically with upper level managers and their teams. I remember one young lady in particular who came to me one time. She was crying because apparently she felt that she wasn't getting anywhere, and that she, you know. And so I convinced her to stick it out, that things might turn around, but you needed to also look at what are you doing that's making your situation worse, and think in terms of what can you do to change that, and then what can you do to change the person who's giving you a hard time, probably the boss. So we did things like that. We worked at helping a manager to understand that's the people who work for you are the people that you can depend on to get the job done if you've hired the right people, number one, and if you've given them the right training, number two. And number three, if you treat them well. If you know, my way or the highway, at that particular point in time in Hartford and in many of the companies around throughout that time period, were looking at ways of making people better at what they were doing. There for a number of years, and then went back into academia, only this time as Associate Dean for School of Business in South Carolina. In each case, we were building. It seems though, and as I look back at my career, most of the stuff that I did was building. I like to plant the garden I don't like to hang around and see it grow. I don't like to hang around and do it all. You know, I go and look for another plant, another place to farm. I remember that I had two cans that were the same side by side. One had gasoline and one had kerosene. We lived at that time in a very rural area of Connecticut, and the farmers around us had said you need to burn your trash to a fine ash, otherwise you're going to attract field mice to your house. So we had a big 55-gallon drum that was already out there that was left there by the previous owner. And I would take kerosene and put the trash in, and throw a little kerosene in, and then just back up and light it. This particular day, I was in a hurry, and I had a can of kerosene and a can of gasoline side by side, which was stupid. And I mistakenly picked up the gasoline can, and I started pouring it. The minute I poured it, I could smell it again, and I started to stop. Too late, boom, the thing blew up. And I was burned over 50% of my body for second and third degree burns. I started working out once I got burned, and the person who got me back into good health was a physical therapist, and she started me weightlifting. And one day I happened to see a class of people doing Taekwondo, and so I joined the class and started learning how to do kicks, and had a wicked roundhouse kick at one point in time. Yeah! And started doing that and enjoying it. But not only that, I found that when I was working on the PhD, of course I was doing those two, that Taekwondo took away some of the pressure. So I use it actually as to help relieve the pressure of that. Anybody going after a PhD has a lot of pressure on them, and you got a lot of stuff to try to do in a short space of time. And so the martial arts took that pressure right away. I'd go, and anytime a professor made me mad about something, I had my bag hanging up down and beat the hell out of the bag. First of all, I like to see accomplishment, not only in myself but in others as well. I guess the bottom line is, you don't quit when the first time you hit the hurdle. You don't quit the second time you hit a hurdle. You don't quit the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth time you hit a hurdle. You keep trying. You figure out, okay, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to do? And what's it going to take to do this? And and it's amazing. The other thing that I find for me is that I feel as though my life has been guided. A lot of people say they've heard God. I can't say I heard him, I felt him. And that was an example of, I would have gone that way. And God said, no, that's not the way, that way.